On June 13, 1983, a young woman in Houston, Texas, picked up a pickaxe during a violent home invasion and, in a frenzy of drugs and rage, hacked two people to death, a man named Jerry Dean and a woman named Deborah Thornton, earning herself the name the Pickaxe Killer. 15 years later, on February 3, 1998, Karla Faye Tucker would become the first woman executed in Texas since the Civil War, but the story that unfolded wasn't just about blood and violence. It became a national debate about redemption, mercy, and the death penalty itself. Was she still the same person by the time she died, or had she truly changed forever? If you're ready to dive deep into one of the most controversial executions in American history, please hit like, share this video with someone who loves true crime, and subscribe to our channel, because we bring you the stories that keep you thinking long after the credits roll. Karla Faye Tucker was born on November 18, 1959, in Houston, Texas. From the outside, her childhood looked like any other working-class American life. Her father, a longshoreman, earned a living from the docks, while her mother struggled to keep the home together. But beneath the surface, Karla's world was marked by instability, poverty, and a family life scarred by alcohol and addiction. By the time she was 8 years old, Karla was already being exposed to a world most children never see. Her parents' marriage was crumbling, the house filled with arguments, and her mother introduced her to drugs when she was still in elementary school. Marijuana came first, then pills, then harder substances. Childhood innocence, gone almost before it began. Karla's voice, from interviews, "I started doing drugs with my mom at 8 years old. By 12, I was already into pills and speed. It was just normal to me. That's what life was." Karla's father, tied to the demanding labor of the docks, had little control over what happened at home. The neighborhood she grew up in was a rough one: bars, motels, and a steady stream of truckers passing through. By the age of 14, Karla had dropped out of school and drifted into prostitution, often trading sex for drugs or money. Her clients weren't strangers. Many were men who knew her family. For Karla, the streets weren't just a dangerous detour. They became her world. She was still a child, yet already living the life of an adult in the darkest corners of Houston. This was the 1970s, when the drug scene pulsed through the city, and Karla was swept up in its current. The people she called friends were bikers, dealers, and hustlers. Nights blurred into mornings and mornings into nights. The chaos of her early years hardened her, but it also set her on a collision course with violence. Children who are exposed to drugs, violence, and sexual exploitation at an early age often normalize it. They don't see a way out. What they see becomes what they become. By her late teens, Karla's life had already split in two, one path leading toward survival, the other toward destruction. It was the road that would soon take her into one of Texas's most infamous crimes, and ultimately, to the death chamber. It was just after midnight, June 13, 1983. The heat of a Houston summer clung to the air. For Karla Faye Tucker and her boyfriend, Danny Garrett, the night began like so many others, high on drugs, restless, and hungry for excitement. But before dawn, two innocent people would be dead, and Karla's name would forever be written into the darkest pages of Texas crime history. Karla and Danny had been using cocaine, alcohol, and other drugs for hours. Fueled by the high, they hatched a plan to break into the home of Jerry Dean, a 27-year-old Houston mechanic who had recently angered Garrett. Their goal was simple: steal his motorcycle. But once inside Jerry Dean's modest apartment, everything unraveled. Jerry Dean was asleep in his bed. Garrett moved in first. A scuffle broke out. In the chaos, Garrett grabbed a hammer and began striking Jerry in the head. The room erupted in violence. And then, Karla noticed something in the corner: a pickaxe. She would later admit that in the haze of drugs and adrenaline, she picked up the heavy weapon. And in a moment that stunned even seasoned prosecutors, Karla Faye Tucker swung the pickaxe into Jerry Dean's body, not once, but multiple times. Each strike brutal, final, irreversible. But Jerry Dean wasn't the only one inside that apartment. Deborah Thornton, 32 years old, wife and mother, had spent the night at Dean's apartment after a marital fight. She wasn't supposed to be there. She had plans for the morning: a husband waiting at home, children who would never see her again. But in that room, she became a witness. And in Karla's world that night, a witness was as good as a target. Karla struck Deborah Thornton with the pickaxe. Blow after blow. When she testified later, she admitted she felt a bizarre sensation, a sexual thrill, with each swing. Those words shocked America. They weren't just the confession of a killer. They painted her as something more terrifying, a woman who seemed to find pleasure in violence. When the murders were over, Jerry Dean and Deborah Thornton lay dead in a blood-soaked room. Karla and Garrett, still intoxicated, grabbed Jerry's motorcycle parts and fled. But the crime scene they left behind was unforgettable. Police officers later described it as one of the most gruesome they had ever witnessed. It wasn't just the brutality. It was the sheer disregard for human life. The victims weren't just killed, they were annihilated. Jerry Dean, a young man with a passion for motorcycles, gone in an instant. Deborah Thornton, a devoted wife and mother, silenced forever. In one night, 2 families' lives were destroyed. And yet, the horror of that crime was only the beginning. Because when Karla Faye Tucker walked into a Texas courtroom, she gave testimony that left jurors stunned, reporters scribbling, and an entire nation divided. By April of 1984, less than a year after the brutal killings, Karla Faye Tucker was no longer a runaway, no longer a drugged-out biker's girlfriend. She was a defendant, shackled and charged with capital murder. And Houston was watching. The trial of Karla Faye Tucker would become one of the most unforgettable court cases in Texas history. From the moment the jury took their seats, it was clear, this wasn't going to be a quiet trial. Prosecutors promised the jury they would hear the details of a crime so gruesome, so chilling, that they would have no choice but to deliver the ultimate punishment, death by lethal injection. When Karla took the stand, she stunned everyone. She admitted to picking up the pickaxe. She admitted to striking Jerry Dean. And then came the moment that froze the courtroom, the testimony that would define her case forever. Every time I hit him with the pickaxe, I got a real high. It was like a sexual release. Those words weren't just a confession. They were a revelation of something darker, a glimpse into the mind of a killer who seemed to find pleasure in bloodshed. Headlines the next morning screamed it across America. The jury heard it. The victims' families heard it. And the nation couldn't look away. Prosecutors painted Karla as cold-blooded, heartless, a woman so lost in drugs and violence that she no longer knew right from wrong. They showed the jury crime scene photos, too gruesome for the evening news. They reminded them of the victims, Jerry Dean, a young man with a passion for motorcycles, and Deborah Thornton, a mother who left behind children who would grow up without her. For Deborah's husband, facing his wife's killer in court was unbearable. He testified about the loss, about the children left behind, about the life that had been torn from him. His words cut through the courtroom like the edge of a blade. And for the jurors, the choice seemed clear. After just 1 hour of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict, guilty of capital murder. And when the judge asked for sentencing, the decision was swift. Karla Faye Tucker was sent to death row. Her story could have ended there, another brutal killer condemned to die in Texas. But what happened next would shock the world. Because behind the razor wire of death row, Karla Faye Tucker would undergo a transformation that no one saw coming. And soon, her fight wouldn't just be about her crimes. It would ignite a national debate about mercy, forgiveness, and the death penalty itself. By 1984, Karla Faye Tucker was no longer just a name in the headlines. She was inmate number 777, sentenced to die by lethal injection. For most death row prisoners, the story ends here, years of appeals, years of silence, and finally the needle. But Karla's story took a turn no one could have predicted. Inside those walls, away from the drugs, away from the chaos of the streets, Karla began to change. She kicked the drugs cold. She started reading. And then, in 1984, something happened that shocked even her fellow inmates. Karla Faye Tucker gave her life to Christianity. In her prison interview she said, "For the first time in my life, I felt free. I didn't care that I was on death row. God had given me a peace I had never known." The transformation was visible. Gone was the drug-addicted biker girl who swung a pickaxe in a frenzy. In her place was a soft-spoken woman who prayed, studied scripture, and counseled other inmates. Guards noticed. Chaplains noticed. And soon, the world noticed too. By the mid-1990s, Karla's case had become more than just a murder story. It was a question that divided America. Should a murderer who claims to be born again still be executed? Could redemption save her from death row? To the victims' families, it didn't matter. Their loved ones were gone. Deborah Thornton's husband spoke out against clemency, saying, "Her repentance doesn't bring my wife back." But to religious leaders, pastors, and even prison guards, Karla was proof that people could change. That even a killer could be saved. Letters poured in from across the world. Politicians, activists, celebrities, and faith leaders begged Texas to spare her life. Even Pope John Paul II sent a direct appeal for clemency. The governor of Texas, George W. Bush, now had a choice to make. Show mercy or uphold the law. Bush, a born-again Christian himself, struggled with the case. But he would later say the law was clear, the punishment must fit the crime. On January 28, 1998, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles unanimously voted against clemency. Karla's execution date was set. And so it came to this. 15 years after the murders, Karla Faye Tucker prepared for her final day. Her last meal was a simple one, a banana, a peach, and a garden salad with ranch dressing. No steak, no fried chicken, no heavy plates. Just fruit and salad. On February 3, 1998, as the clock struck shortly after 6 p.m., Karla was led into the small, green-walled room known simply as the Walls Unit Death Chamber. Witnesses watched as she was strapped onto the gurney. Her last words would silence even her harshest critics. Insert, reading Karla's last words, soft, emotional voice. Yes, sir, I would like to say to all of you, the Thornton family and Jerry Dean's family, that I am so sorry. I hope God will give you peace with this. Baby, I love you. Ron, give Peggy a hug for me. Everybody has been so good to me. I love all of you very much. I will see you all when you get there. I will wait for you. At 6:45 p.m., Karla Faye Tucker was pronounced dead. She was the first woman executed in Texas since the Civil War. And her story, of violence, redemption, and debate, still lingers like a shadow over America's death penalty. Some say justice was served. Others say mercy was denied. But one thing is certain, the Pickaxe killings of 1983 and the execution of Karla Faye Tucker will forever remain one of the most haunting chapters in Texas history. Thank you for watching. If this story gripped you, help us tell more. Please hit the like button, share this video with a friend who loves true crime, and subscribe to our channel. Because here, we don't just tell you what happened, we take you inside the cases that still make America ask, justice or mercy?